Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for another video. So in today's video I am going to be decorating with the new camping house that we got in the premium shop this week. I feel like you could use this house in a lot of different types of builds. It doesn't just have to be for like a campsite, but that was the kind of style I wanted to go for with this. I wanted it to feel very much like it would fit in on a campsite and it would be somewhere that you could stay whilst you are camping. So I started off by popping this up in the Sunlit Plateau. I actually don't have any room in my forest as it's completely decorated, so this was the spot I felt like worked for this, and it kind of, you can still utilize a lot of this in a different biome, whether it's the glade or the forest or somewhere completely different. And I started off by placing out a lot of the items I knew I was going to be using, just to save time of you guys having to watch me put it all out. But some of the bigger items I include in this is Buzz's RV, the hyena cave, and also the craftable tents from the DLC. You could always alternate these tents with the ones we got with Mulan if you don't have the DLC, and obviously the hyena cave is something that just pops up in Scrooge's store, so if you haven't got it yet, it will be in Scrooge's store. But I started off by mapping in the rock pathway and also using some of the wooden plank craftable pathway to use underneath the houses. I gave the camping house a little like decking area, as you can put it under the house, and it did it at the front of each tent and leading off from the RV to give it this really nice like kind of structured look and look like the tents are always here. And then I went in with some of the other furniture items and started decorating it into different sections. Outside the front of the camping house, I wanted to use the new Agrabah rug hanging item that we got in the premium shop, as I felt like as soon as I saw this, I felt like it looked like a kind of like clothes line you would get in a garden, and for me it just felt like these are like maybe towels or something that the people use on the campsite, and they have hung them up to dry after a long day at the beach or in a river or something like that. So that was kind of my thought process with having this. I also obviously made a traditional campsite with a little campfire and some logs around it, and then I also make a little like seating area with a barbecue for people to sit and hang out at, and just kind of do different themes in different areas and kind of start mapping in where I want the furniture to be. I do have to move things around a lot as I wasn't kind of set of where I wanted everything to go, but I decided to get these kind of focused areas put in before I then kind of like map out the trees and everything in the background. So I carry on popping those all around and figuring out what works best where. Now once I popped in most of the furniture, I went around with some of the first bits of lighting. I used the craftable lanterns to be the kind of like main lighting sources at the entrances and exits, and then I used some of the stone lanterns that we got in the Mulan Star Path to line this pathway area. I just felt like these would look really nice to be kind of along the path guiding people along, and they match really well with the rock rugs that I'm using to create the pathing in this build. So I kind of popped those in to match it all together, and I do go in later and kind of expand this and change where they are slightly, but for the most part I just wanted them to line these pathways and kind of give the people here a really nice route to walk down. And then I went to the last few bits I had left. I only really had like a bike and some barrels and things like that, and started deciding where I was going to pop them. So I did have to change things around a little bit to pop them in places that I felt like they made more sense, but I kind of started dotting those around to get those final furniture pieces in. Now once I'd done that, I went in with the paving that I was going to use underneath these rock rugs. I decided to go with the unbordered mud pathway. I was debating using the one that goes really well in Sunlit, which is like that really nice like sun-baked road, and I did debate that, but I felt like the mud path just looked too perfect with the rock rugs and worked so well in a campsite. So I decided to pop those underneath the rock rugs in a kind of like changing direction. I didn't do it as like straight paths, I did them kind of winding, so I chopped them in and out to make it look really natural and like they weren't too structured. And I do obviously go in later and add foliage around the edges of the path so they don't look as odd as this, because when you use the unbordered path it can look a bit strange for a while because it just has no real kind of structure to it because the corners are so sharp and we can't round out the pathways. So for now I just pop that in, get a good idea of where I want the paths to go before I then start decorating it later on. Now when it comes to foliage, I did create a little like mini rock path leading up to the kind of clothing line so that you could see that you can access this point. And then for the foliage on the path, I decided to obviously use ferns to be in those areas that I knew people would need to be able to access and walk around on. So those were kind of put in front of the tents and some of the main spots. And then I started putting in a lot of different types of bushes and plants around the edge of the pathway and also around the back of the build. I mainly focused it on the edge of the pathway for now just because I hadn't mapped in the trees yet, but I did use a variety of different bushes. I used some of the forest, glade and sunlit bushes, so we had like a nice variety of the dark greens with the oranges and the reds. I wanted it to kind of fit in that autumn feel in this kind of build, but you could always just use the foresty colours or you could always use some different colour plants if you felt like it, but for me I just wanted to have it have that really nice kind of autumn campsite feel. Now for trees, I started off with going around and dotting in a load of fir trees. I knew I wanted these to be like the main trees in the build because I feel like they work so well in a campsite but also so well with this cabin because of the dark wood colour of it. So I started mapping those in around the build and kind of giving it this outline, and then I went in with some of the other trees such as the oak trees, the red maples and some of like the more swampier trees to kind of map out that background, as well as adding in some of the glowing mushrooms in different areas around the build. I didn't want to use too many and make it look too kind of fairy like, so I did kind of minimize the amount I used, but then it gave me a good idea of where I could put those trees in and make the colors really pop. I use them in different sizes and shapes to fill in those gaps, and obviously in this build I do fill in gaps more than I would normally in a build purely because this is an empty biome, so I needed to kind of cover the background of it so you guys couldn't just see through all the trees, and I wanted to give it the illusion that it was in a forest. So I did use a lot more trees in this than I would usually. So if you're someone who has a lower item limit and you're looking at this and thinking that's a lot of trees and a lot of bushes and shrubbery and things like that, I wouldn't usually use this many. It is kind of just to ensure you guys can't see too much in the background. But once I'd added in a lot of the bigger trees, I added in some of the kind of like dead trees and tree stumps in here to give it that really nice forest look, and started trying to block out those edges just so you guys couldn't see the empty biome that was hiding behind. Something that I did decide to use in here once I'd kind of blocked out the main areas with foliage was some of the bracken that you can put out. I don't tend to use this very often. I usually use the meadow grass or the beach grass a lot of the time for most of my builds, but I felt like in a campsite it just made sense to have this more dense, darker kind of foliage that really fit the vibe of the rest of the plants a lot more. So I dotted those into some of the open spots and then continued to fill around those and make sure that all these outer edges were kind of covered, and made sure that there was no kind of, it wasn't blocking any furniture, wasn't blocking any of those main areas. So I did tweak things around a little bit and figure out to make sure that you could see all of the furniture and nothing was too crowded and you could still kind of access everything, as well as ensuring that everything was kind of filled out and looked really overgrown, which was the overall vibe I wanted everything to have. Now with the other side of the bridge where I had the little mini section with Buzz's RV and the hyena cave, I obviously wanted to continue with the same types of plants and foliage that I had in the other side of the forest. I didn't want it to feel too different, even though the hyena cave kind of has a spooky look to it, which was kind of the aim I was going for. I wanted it to feel like kind of a hidden cave at the side of the forest that they've not really noticed, and I felt like it was just kind of a cool feature to use in here, but I didn't want it to take away from the kind of wholesome forest look, so I made sure to add in some lighting in here and continue the path lights to really match it all together, even though it was slightly different over here. And then I went in with some extra lighting to finish up, which was to add some of the jar lamps all around the build to give it these really nice warm glows. I love these jar lamps because they kind of look like outdoor lights, so that was kind of the aim I was going for, is to dot these about all throughout the campsite to just be these little mini lights you can see glowing. They're not very bright, but I just felt like it was a nice little touch. Again, if you're on a limited item limit, do not worry about this. So here we are in the final build. As you can see, I've made it sunset, and we go through the archway and we go into our campsite. We have got the rock path leading us in, and I've also added some fireflies off camera to make it even more magical. We have got our 2 tents here for people to sit in and stay in. We've also got the little well on the left of them, and lots of crates and barrels and sacks and things like that. A lot of craftable stuff around, and then the little lagoon next to the cabin, which is surrounded by a lot of foliage. I also added some lily pads onto the floor, and then outside the cabin we can see the little mini decking area I made with the guitar and also the bike on there to make it look like it was really lived in. The little rock path leads to our hanging carpets, which to me are like hanging towels with the little wash basket next to them and a broom to show that people obviously are living here at the time. And then next to the water we have one of the new camping chairs and a little cooler and a boat to show that someone would sit here and fish during the day. We then have a little water fountain and a trough just to kind of feel like this is where people would go to collect their water and things like that. I wanted to feel like they were very off the grid. And then as we come around to the middle section, we have got our kind of like dining area for everyone to hang out in. I've put some food on the tables, and these little benches would be a perfect spot for people to sit and hang out at. They've got the barbecue to cook food, and then obviously the brand new cooler that we can craft with the event is sat at the side for them to store all of their cold drinks and snacks. Heading out of there, on the right we have our little campfire set up. This is a really cute little spot. It's kind of tucked away slightly, so it feels a lot more secluded. There's some logs and some books around here to show that people actually sit here and hang out, and I've put obviously the glowing mushrooms and the lights in the bushes behind, which gives this area a little bit of extra magic. Next to that we have the bigger black tent, and next to that we've got Gaston's archery set, a lot of other eclectic items to make it feel very lived in. And as this tent was a bit bigger, I kind of liked that it was separate from the other ones to feel as if it's like one that maybe the adults would sleep in or someone more fancy. As we head under the bridge, we have got one of these smaller pumpkin craftable archways, and over here we've obviously got Buzz's RV with the little wooden path leading us to it, and the hyena cave to be a kind of spooky item in the corner, and lots of trees behind. Here are some final shots of the finished build. I actually wasn't sure how this was going to turn out, and I kind of just started with it and just went with it. I didn't really have a plan. I obviously knew it was going to be a campsite, but I wasn't really sure how it would turn out, but it actually ended up being a really lovely build. I'm a little bit sad that it's not going to be able to kind of stay exactly as it is because it's in a bit of an odd spot, but I will recreate this at some point as a permanent fixture because I think I really love how it looks. Let me know down below what you think and where you are going to be putting this new house in your valley if you did pick it up, and let me know what you think of the build, if there's anything you tweak and change, and anything that you really liked. Make sure you like and subscribe. Thank you for all your support on the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!